and welcome to part 3 of planning the production for your media coursework. Until now, you have planned the front page and come up with ideas for it. You've got a name for your magazine, you've thought of what the masthead is going to look like, and you've done some thinking for the double page spread and the advertorial. The next stage is to take the research you've done and to actually start to produce a written piece of work, a written document, and this is called the Statement of Aims and Intentions, and eventually it will be 500 words. Now this is to be produced after the research but before the production, so you've got to write this sort of essay style thing and get all your ideas together in it. Now this is actually worth 10 marks out of the 60 available for coursework, so it equates to 70% of your coursework, so it's an important thing to do. However, at this stage we've only researched the print work, which is the front cover, the double page spread and the advertorial, so we're only going to aim to write 400 words for this part of it. When we get on to researching websites, then we can make up the difference and make it up to 500 words. So that you have to be very precise with the way you write about this, because it's only a small amount of words really in which you've got to compact and get together all your ideas for the production. And to help you do it, we're going to go back to the magazine brief, what you've been asked to do by the exam board, and we're going to make sure that things are covered in there. So on the brief, you've been asked to create a cross-media production. That means it's a production that goes across different areas of the media. So this is going to be a print magazine, but it's also going to be a website and audio-visual material as well. So it's going across different media platforms. You've chosen a particular magazine for a particular subject or particular genre, and you've come up with a name for it as well. So what is the name of your magazine? What is the and really sort of thinking about that in more detail, what are the connotations of that name? And this slide just illustrates the task that you've been asked to do. As we've just stated, it's a cross-media production going across different media platforms. One of the first things I want you to do is to identify the major publishing house that you've picked. Now these organisations are conglomerate companies, they are horizontally integrated, and I would like you to mention that in the piece of work that you do as well. But actually pick one, look at the publishing houses, I've mentioned them in the document I've sent to you, and try to pick one that would produce and own a magazine like the one that you've decided to make. But make sure you name the actual publishing house. Another key thing that you must do is show great awareness of the audience throughout this written piece of work. And of course it's an 18 to 34-year-old audience, and it's got to be mainstreamers or aspirers. So this is really, really important. You've got to identify what audience your magazine is for. If it's a mainstream audience, then it will be really a very stereotypical representation to give that audience a security of themselves in the mainstream, a view of themselves in the mainstream. If it's an aspirer audience, I would like you to work with the Berger theory and just think about how it offers a view of the future buyer. You can use that theory, you can name Berger, and how that creates an envy and anxiety for the audience because they want to aspire to that view of themselves as the future buyer. So again, we can base it on the research that you've carried out up until now. And just looking at the brief in more detail, it's really important that you realize that you've got to represent it says at least one social group. What this means is you've got to photograph people. So you've got to have people in your magazine and in your double page spread and on your advertorial, as well as on the front cover. So I'm going to ask you in your statement of aims to say what sort of person you think you're going to have on your front cover. What are they going to look like? What's the background going to be? So it's important that you're thinking about that. Some people just like to photograph objects, but it doesn't really work on this. You've got to have people in there. It's got to be a representation of a social group. And of course, you are planning to design a front cover, and within this I would like you to use some of the terminology within the statement of aims as terminology that will enable you to do that. So the masthead and what font style are going to use for masthead. Of course, I've mentioned the main image, what main image you're going to have on the front cover, what setting are you going to have, but also what cover lines are you going to have. You've already sort of planned for this, so you just need to mention those in the statement of aims. And of course, you started to think through some aspects of the double page feature or the double page spread as well. In the statement of aims, you should talk about this a little bit, the subject for it, how it's going to fit in with the lifestyle. But really, the bottom line for this is how is it going to appeal to its target audience? What is the impact on the target audience? How is it going to appeal? Is it going to offer a stereotypical representation of the audience or offer this view of the future buyer? So again, in less detail, but some comment on the double page spread is necessary. And just to look at the advertorial as well, again, you've started to think through the advertorial, but I wanted you to think about this in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to go into some finer detail about the advertorial and some considerations that you need to make for it. So as you will know by now, an advertorial is basically an advertisement dressed up as a written article, as a feature, and is a collaboration between the magazine and a producer of a brand. Now, for this, you've got to think about developing your own brand for something. It's a little bit tricky, this. So you should create an advertorial for an original brand or product or service. So the word original is important. And as you can see, it's highlighted here. Existing brand should not be used. So you can't just sort of take an existing product and use that. You've got to come up with your own brand. All right, so that's the first key point. So if we just think about this sentence here, so learners should invent a new brand name and construct a brand identity through their use of elements of media language. So what you have to do for the advertorial is come up with a product and develop a brand identity and brand name for that particular product. So it can't be something that's already existing. It can't be a sports watch like a Fitbit or whatever that is already out there, or a perfume that's already out there, or whatever. You've got to come up with a name for a product, and you've got to sort of develop a brand identity by giving it a label and thinking about the font and the font style and, you know, things like that. However, to help you, what you can do is take photographs. You've got to take these photographs yourself because they've got to be original images, but you can take them of existing products. So for example, if you're promoting a new phone or sports watch or perfume or brand of clothing, you can take photographs of something that already exists. But what you would have to do is change the labeling of it. We can do this in Photoshop, and as I said before, the font style, and create your own brand identity for that particular item. So, you know, obviously this is going to help you when you come to do the advertorial. This slide is just a reminder of the second part of the coursework that we're going to do, which is producing on a website of the online stuff and the things that we have to sort of bear in mind for that, but we haven't started to research that yet, so we're not going to include this at this time in the statement of aims. Now, to help you prepare to write the statement of aims, there is, yes, another table, and I know this is the third in the series of tables, but I believe it will help you in pinpointing the key aspects of things that you need to do. And some of the stuff in this table you have already done. You'll have already done this as part of your research, so it's important to think it through and not just think, oh, I've already got that somewhere else, because this will help you put together your statement of aims and intentions. If you follow each one of these tasks that are outlined here, and of course just go through it. So in the opening of this, you would say, well, I've been asked to produce a cross-media production. Cross-media means it's a production that goes across different platforms, and this is what a magazine brand does, because it's a physical magazine. It's also online, and it's also audio visual material on Facebook or YouTube or wherever. So you would just, as if you were writing the essay, just complete it here as best you can. The interest in the magazine, it's a sports magazine that will focus on men's fitness or whatever. Who is the publisher? You need to identify one of the big sort of publishers. So have a look at a publisher, whether Bauer or Dennis Publishing or TI Media, who produce that type of magazine. That's all you need to do. Who would produce the type of magazine that you're coming up with. Other things that we could I want you to talk about as well to help you prepare for this: the connotations of the name of your magazine. So as we've looked at this before, cosmopolitan means sophisticated and sort of diverse and things like that. So as terms and connotations, so what are the connotations of your magazines, or is it just very factual? And maybe that will link in with the audience. Who is your audience? Is it, obviously you've got the age group here, so that'll be the same for everybody, but is it sort of males, females, or is it for males and females? Is it a unisex audience? So it's things like this I want you to start to pin down. Again, work through these, and if you've got any questions, get them out there on Teams, and I will try to answer those questions for you. All right, so good luck with that.